Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of the Imperfect Men's Club podcast. My name is Mark Aylward, and I'm here as always with my good friend, colleague, and co-host, Jim Gurley. Um, yeah, very interesting pregame, maybe more so than most. I think it did, as it always does, Jim, came from one of our experiences in the last recent few days. And you had quite a few interesting stories that I believe are kind of connected and I appreciate you sharing them with me. You can be as transparent or as guarded as you like for our recording here, but I would encourage you to open up to the extent that you're comfortable because the series of events that took place that started, at least in my observation, from you getting sick with pneumonia a couple of weeks ago and how that kind of started this process of quote unquote throwing you off your game. Um, and it continued to manifest itself to a particular feeling that you suggested recently where you just felt off and then you had the opportunity to be on your own for a couple of days, which helped you, it seems, kind of recalibrate. All of this now is happening in the Easter season because Easter was Sunday, and the idea of dying and being resurrected, whether it's as a person, Jesus Christ, or an idea or a relationship, there's a real interesting kind of parallel and analogy going on about this opportunity that you shared through another relationship that you had, where a woman said to you that she uses Easter to kind of take it upon herself to reflect on what can improve and what can be left behind. And very, very interesting conversation. I'm going to throw it to you before we get too deep into it. I didn't cover all of those stories. You can cover whatever you want, but what are your thoughts on, did I get that right?
Well, you did, Mark, as you always do. So I appreciate that. But yeah, the word that we came up with together, I think actually you may even mention it's a time of self-reflection. So
Mm-hmm.
Easter is known as it's a holiday, but it's also a resurrection that I, as a baptized Catholic, quite honestly never really understood or followed. It was just an Easter egg hunt or whatever it is that
Mm-hmm.
you celebrate it. But this year was different because, like you said, I had struggled uh, the last couple of weeks of just not be able to concentrate. Not depression, but definitely in a bad place. I couldn't seem to get anything done, and that's usually a sign that something's not right. And so I used the weekend because I had it to myself for solitude, which I always like. Took a trip to Santa Barbara. Uh, I'll let you. We'll share that story as well. But just sometimes you realize that um, there's an energy to you or a negative energy, and you have these conflicts or you have these experiences with people, and it's not right. Something's not right. And so I've learned instead of resisting that, try to understand what is it that's going on either in the universe or what am I pushing out to the world that is not coming back to me in a positive way. And I remember this conversation. Her name was Susan, and this is years ago, probably 15, 20 years ago. She was somewhat of a rigid woman, I would say, on the surface, cold and not very warm. But I learned later on a very good person. She had a difficult childhood that I later learned that she's very protective. And that happens when something bad to us happens, right? In your case, a divorce, or we all have these events in our lives, right? And she said, I use Easter as a time to think about the past and how I could be better for the rest of the year. And so when I remember her saying that years ago, but this year I took a little further because I was struggling trying to look for answers, and I did a prompt. What is Easter? And this is what it came up with, and I thought it was very good. In fact, I've shared it with probably three or four people since then. I was surprised how they came back because we're not saying this in the way of Jesus uh, being crucified on Friday and then coming, resurrection on Sunday. It's more symbolic than that, and that's what I appreciate about it. Now, you as a Catholic, I think has a whole other meaning. That's why I'm interested in your perspective and insights. But I came up with these five, um, I don't know, I guess we'll call them questions that I think are super valuable, uh, that we should always be asking ourselves, but particularly once a year, take an inventory of what's happened in the past to move forward. So let's go through them. And then typically I do five, but I have a bonus, which I think is probably the most impactful one. And I'll save that one for the very end. That's
Yeah,
number six.
I think the weave in whatever stories you want to weave in there or
Mhm,
leave them out. It doesn't matter to me. I
mhm,
think that we have a time constraint of we shoot for 30 minutes and
mhm,
we'll honor that. But I think the other thing that strikes me before I start to read them is that I try to do this every day. And
mhm,
and I it's not the same exercise. If you have a couple of days of solitary and you can journal and you can listen to music and podcasts and drive and run and swim in the ocean and you have all that time, it's a more elaborate process because you're afforded you have a day or 2 days or a weekend or whatever, not just like 5 minutes. But I think the exercise is the exercise, and even if you did it 5 minutes every day and a couple hours or a couple days once a year, I think this process of so much comes out of self-reflection that, and it can be dangerous too, because you can do
mhm.
too much of it
Yeah.
and focus on it too much
Yeah.
and not be able to move forward until you rid yourself of whatever responsibility or
Yeah.
regret or guilt or whatever the emotions are that come from reflecting on what you did, good, bad, or indifferent. The bad stuff's like, okay, well, I don't want that to dominate this exercise, right? I want the recovery and the repurposing and the reflection to lead to how do I get better? How do I be a better person? How do I
Mhm.
have better relationships, whatever. So
Yep.
yeah, I think it's and my Catholic opinion is I'm more Catholic today than I was 30 years ago and yesterday. And so I've been doing a lot more reading and I've been doing a lot more engaging in conversation with people like my dad and my older brother, who are
Mhm.
very faithful people, because I have a desire to learn more about this. So it's interesting that you brought Easter to the topic because I'm interested in hearing other people's opinions about it too. The reading that we read this morning, and I read every day, the
Yeah.
prayer is Jesus is walking around and he's back and people don't recognize him because they're all convinced he's dead, and when you die you're gone for good
Mhm.
except for him, and so that whole reaction to these people not recognizing who he was and then recognizing who he was, and it's not like it's just really, really interesting that it all came together. And you had a couple stories that I think are directly related to your
Yeah,
experience here.
if we, yeah, maybe if we could share them, we will. But I appreciate what you're saying, Mark, because this is the context of this is super important. One, it's once a year, right? Like you said, you do it every day. I think everybody does things differently. I appreciate also what you're saying. You could also overdo it, but this is a once a year practice that she had that I'm going to do from now on. This is in the context of a relationship with others.
Hmm.
So I'll let you start with number one, but what we're saying is this is an inventory. This is a reflection, a self-reflection of your life and your relationships with others. Could be multiple relationships, or it could be a particular relationship that is controlling your life for bad, typically for good or for
Hmm.
bad.
Yeah,
So
I've got a
let's
couple of examples of that I'd like to
I think
reflect
we
on
all
with
do. I
you.
think I
Yeah.
think we have to self-reflect about how these relationships are serving us, but also how are we serving others? Because if this is back to this energy, if there is a negative energy and you can tell that you're having a negative effect on somebody, that's worth stopping if you care at all about people and yourself and doing some self-reflection.
Well,
So
so
let's
at first it's worth noticing, and then it's worth doing
well,
something
that
about.
it fits into our podcast, right? What's our
Yeah.
number one of these five areas? In the center is self-awareness. So this is
Yeah.
the ultimate self-awareness. So it
Yeah.
could be number two. After self-awareness, you have to self-reflect on what you're putting out to the world and what is coming back to you in the world, because it
I
is an
think it's
energy.
yeah, I think it's a responsible thing to do, and I don't think
Yep.
most people do it at
Yeah.
all regularly or enough, myself
Yeah.
included. But
Yeah.
yeah, so it's a good list of six, and it's like Easter Sunday represents a narrative of renewal. It symbolizes now number one is the death of an old stagnant state and the resurrection of a better, more vibrant one.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I mean, there's so many things to think about. And to your point about the energy that you emanate into the world, that's definitely a thing because
Hmm.
I have personal experience with both. I suppose we all do walking into a room and lighting the room up with positive optimism, confidence, great energy. Like people want to listen to me and they want to follow me. And I
Hmm.
have also the same experience walking into a room where I just got the shit beat out of me, or I'm tired, or I'm angry, or I'm mad. And people just want to move away from me. And so it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
it's a
that's
thing.
exactly. I've been in a couple of meetings. You said you could see people are are really uptight around you, and yeah. So anyway, this because we're I don't want to run out of time, but the word in this one, the death, obviously of an old stagnant. The word stagnant is super important because often we'll tolerate something it just becomes stagnant, and that's not good. That stagnant is not good. Sometimes you have to, well, like it says, the depth of something, an old stagnant state. It's a state of mind. It's a state of purpose, and knowing that some change is actually hard but important, and the sooner you do it, probably the better off you
You
are.
know,
So.
it's what's interesting, and I again, respectfully of time, I won't drag on. But one of the things I've noticed between me and my girlfriend, that's completely my responsibility, because I am a can be a sarcastic prick, and I love sarcasm. I've always used it in my humor. And but I grew up, around guys that were from Boston, and they were all sarcastic pricks. I mean,
Mhm.
it's like the language
Yeah,
of
that's yeah.
Boston is the sarcastic prick language.
Yeah,
And
talk
that
about
what
a
I'm
narrative, right? A
yeah,
narrative. Yeah.
what
The
I'm
narrative is
finding
always sarcastic. Yeah.
what I'm finding with her is she's not from Boston. She's from
Mhm.
Nevada and or Nevada or whatever you're
Yeah.
supposed to say. And I've been noticing lately that my sarcasm is not as appreciated as it once was. So I have recently
Sarcasm or
committed.
humor. Yeah,
Uh,
it's a
I
combination of both.
well,
But yeah.
teasing. It's like
Yeah.
I made a commitment very recently, like days ago.
Yeah.
I'm going to stop that.
That's
I,
self-reflection. So
yeah,
yeah.
I'm going to
Yeah.
stop that. So
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
wanted to bring a life example to the number one there, and I'm sure you've
Okay.
got a few as well. But
Oh yeah.
um, that's you want to speak to that, or you want to move to number
No,
two?
like I said, I want to get through these, so I don't want to run out
Okay.
of time. So
So,
let's start going through them.
number two, the active choice to let old grievances die so the relationship can flourish. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
this
think
one.
that's basically another way of saying forgiveness, I suppose. I think
No, no. I mean that's fine if that's how you feel about it. I think it's back to this uh, being nice versus being kind,
yeah,
and it seems to always come up. I think we started using it a couple years ago, but it always rings true. I am exhausted with people being nice.
yeah, yeah,
I truly don't want to deal with you. I mean, truly, as in, I appreciate nice gestures and things like that, but I want people in my life. Remember, this is the context of these five, which turned into six, is the relationships that we have close to us, the people that we actually care about, that we have make time and energy for. That this you're either going to have to end it to create a new relationship, and then be honest and have the hard conversations about the maybe some the grievances, some things that didn't go well in the past, for in order for the relationship to thrive. It's also the gardening term, right? It's making room for new seeds, and
yeah.
then
You got to get the weeds out of the way.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's how I took this one. Yeah. So
yeah.
anyway,
Yeah. No,
yeah,
and number three, the initiation of a rebirth of the friendship. Acknowledge past distance without blame, and offer a fresh start.
yep.
Um, yeah, I think the one of the things that comes to mind, a good friend of mine called me the other day, hadn't talked to him in a long while, and
Mhm.
we made a deal after a battle that we had with too many drinks by the pool years ago about politics, that we just weren't going to talk about politics anymore.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
he's one of my best friends in the whole world, and is 99.9% of him is just fabulous. And that this one point, I mean, talk about oil and vinegar. And we rebirthed that friendship in the moment. We
Hmm.
woke up the next day actually and said, this can't stand. We have to, we can't blame. We have to acknowledge what happened, and let's do whatever we can to make sure it doesn't happen again. That's a big deal, you
Yeah,
know.
it's very cool. Though you cared enough about each other that you're willing to rebirth it. This is also as much for letting go and also existing relationships. Everything needs a rebirth. Eventually, you need a reset, recalibration of the relationship.
Well, I
For
think the flip side to me of that too is you got to protect yourself too,
Mhm.
because we all have people in our lives that if we let them in again, they're going to do it again.
Hmm.
And how many tries do you get? Being taken
Hmm.
advantage of for me is like, well, you
Yeah,
probably should work on not being taken advantage of by the same person twice.
yeah.
And I think there might be an argument in our lives, respectively, for maybe giving a handful of people a third chance or second chance.
Hmm.
I don't, that's never, when I look back on those decisions, my instincts, my gut instincts are usually pretty good. That
Yeah,
second chance is usually just going to hurt me. But
yeah.
it's a balance, man. It's a balance,
It is. Yeah, yeah.
So, fourth one's forgiveness. Leave our old patterns behind and start a fresh chapter. I
Hmm.
remember saying to my business partner, who at the time was a very good friend, we've lost touch. Not that there's not a friendship there, there's just not a lot of communication. But I had said to him something one day like, I'm just having a really difficult time forgiving my ex wife.
Mm.
And he started laughing. And he's like, dude, with what you just went through, I wouldn't fucking rush that process. Don't feel bad about that at all.
Hmm. 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 Well, the forgiveness is often not for them, it's for yourself. And that's the hardest
that's
part, is the ego.
yeah.
I think so much of this is, I'm speaking for myself, obviously, right now. Forgiveness is hard because often they scarred your ego and you've taken something personal, and it's forgiving them. Also, life is timing. I do believe, people are in different places. You don't know what they're going through, but
Hmm.
also life is priority. And if somebody is not making you a priority in their life and you're making them a priority, then I think you have to forgive them for that and move on, and not.
Yeah, chasing friendships is not healthy.
No, it's not. Yeah,
I've done
it's choosing the people that you want in your life, not chasing them.
yeah.
And I think the human brain, just by its nature, why you've heard me say this before, right? All human beings want the same two things, and you know what they are, right? They're in no particular order. One, to matter,
Hmm.
to be meaningful, to have an impact, to matter to somebody, and two, what they don't have,
Yeah.
because as soon as you get what you have, you move on to something else. And yeah, forgiveness is hard. Forgive yourself. Self forgiveness is probably one of the top five of ourselves after self awareness, and now self reflection is you have to self forgive. Self forgiveness.
Yeah,
Yeah,
give yourself a break. Yeah.
yes. Don't
It
be so hard
is
on yourself. Yeah.
it's like I've said many times, though, I think most of the good things that I've accomplished in life that I think are worthwhile are they're hard.
Oh,
The things,
yeah,
good things are hard most of the time, and
yeah,
that's a nice realization. But
yeah.
yeah, forgiveness is, well, today I can happily tell you that every time I go to mass or watch mass, depending on what I'm doing, and when it's time for the sign of peace, I extend peace to her, and that means I'm doing pretty
That's
good.
forgiveness. Yeah,
It might not be all the way there, but it's pretty damn close.
yeah, yeah.
Number five is becoming an agent of new beginnings, which
Mhm.
involves evaluating whether your current approach to these relationships aligns with the idea of a fresh start.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, most of the work that you do, most of the work that I do is pretty closely related to agency. You like that word, I like that word, and new beginnings is, that covers a lot of ground.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, the word agency obviously rings true a lot of things we do, but it reminded me that um, as an agent of that relationship, you have to make these hard decisions. It kind of goes back to the beginning of our conversation today about leadership. Um, Good leadership requires hard decisions. and those hard decisions make people feel really uncomfortable. But you have to be the agent that is willing to have that hard conversation in order to create a new environment, a new landscape of a fresh start. So it's back also goes back to being nice or being kind. I could be nice and not say anything, but being kind is have the agency, self agency, to have the hard conversations and be okay with the outcome, even though it may be uncomfortable. And if that outcome, which is going to set up the last one, is the end, then that's sometimes the best for both people.
Yeah, you have to make space for things being over, and sometimes that's really hard. But I think that, if you're going into this authentically, then you have the well-being of the other person and your own well-being in mind, then whatever the end result is going to come is going to come.
Hmm.
I think we talked a lot in the pregame about just the message that we're trying to put out into the world, whether it's the show notes of an episode or the actual recording or the overall, 5 years of doing this together, is it's well intended,
Yeah.
it's well
Well, if we have time,
intended.
I'll share that story with you on this episode uh, about how the world sometimes aligns us with people. But let's see if we can get through the last couple ones, and if we got enough time, I'll share that
Well,
story with you.
we're on the last one. So this is number six, the
Hmm.
Easter cycle. Something must truly end, or quote unquote die, for a new version of yourself to begin. In that, quote unquote, the resurrection. And that really ties it nicely into the biblical stuff. But the thing about the Bible for me, and we're talking about Easter and resurrection and death, is it's amazing. The more that I read day to day, and
Hmm.
as you are well aware, it's an annual cycle, right? It starts
Yeah,
all over, and and
yeah.
upon Jesus's resurrection, we start the next season, a new year.
It's part of the four seasons. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
It's amazing to me, the wisdom,
Yep.
and the other thing is the details, like
Hmm.
what kind of sandals he was wearing and what the dirt looked like and
Hmm.
what the sky looked like. It's like the more I read this stuff, and we don't have to go into religion, but the more
Yeah,
I read
and
this
I
stuff.
appreciate you saying it, but like you said, what was created, I don't know, thousands of years ago, whatever it was a framework,
Hmm.
and that's what this episode was about. It was not about necessarily Jesus. That's
Hmm.
again your uh, spiritual beliefs, when and we all have different ones, but it symbolizes what it symbolizes is has such a uh, an important impact on how we live our lives. There's going to be four seasons, whether we resist it or not. There's going to
Yeah.
be, and that really was the takeaway after self-reflection uh, on the hard decisions you have to make in order to make room
Well, I
in
think
your
that
life for new people.
as we're wrapping up, I think the things that it makes me think about are twofold. Is that I think that there's probably space for some form of this exercise on a more regular basis, and
Mhm.
and like I say, I suspect that when I do this. So I have this daily journaling thing that we've talked about. The other thing that happens is circumstance, right? So
Yep.
somebody might do something or say something to you that makes you want to reflect on some of these things, right?
Mhm.
Something happens to you in your life, something unfair or unjust or hardship of some kind. Circumstances, I think if your reaction to negative circumstances is self-reflection, you're better off than if your reaction is just anger that's not directed at anybody in particular. You're just mad at the world.
Mhm.
But then I think the annual thing, I appreciate the fact that you've decided clearly that you're going to make this one of your annual things,
Mhm.
because that is reflective to me of how impactful the culmination of the events of the last couple of weeks have been on you.
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna run with your word circumstances because I do think it fits into a story I shared with you in the pregame about serendipity. It's yeah, kind of one of the same. Often, is it serendipity or is it the universe aligning you to be uh, in the presence of somebody else for no particular reason? And I
Hmm.
love the word serendipity because it's um, it's not serendipity sometimes. It's the universe aligning itself because it does. And
Well,
again,
I
this,
think I'll take that even a step further and lean on my faith and say, I think God puts people in front of you when he thinks you need
yeah,
that
yeah, like I
person
said,
in
you could
front of you.
call it whatever you want,
Yep.
whatever
Yep.
your preference is.
Yep.
I think as you get later on in life, these aren't coincidences. They're not. It's alignment. It is the
Hmm.
universe aligning. So I'll share the story. We got about 4 minutes left. Um, but as I mentioned, I run, a few times a week. I'm not a big runner, but when I do run, I run hills. I sprint the hills basically. Just it was a rugby conditioning. That's
Hmm. Hmm.
in rugby, you yeah, it's a game of sprinting and resting. So you try to simulate that, and if you find a super steep hill, you're conditioning for that. So I still do that, even though I haven't played in you decades ago. It's just a conditioning I do for my mind. It's back to our
Hmm.
um, relationship with ourselves. Our
Hmm.
physical health and our mental health is directly related. So it was a really nice day. I live in Northern California, so there's a lot of trees, and it's just a beautiful time of year because everything's green and massive trees, 200 feet. And there's this one trail I run on that goes up these hills. So as I was pulling in, I saw this group of people that were coming in. So I recognized them. And then as I ran the trail, I ran up to the part where it's really vertical. I was doing my sprint. So I did my first one, second one, and I walk down, then run back up. And I walk down and I see this one of the guys of the four that were pulling into the parking lot when I was first starting off, laying on the ground or laying on the trail where I'm running. And I said, "Hey, you okay?" And he looked up at me and he was laying on his side and he's like, "Yeah, yeah, I'm okay. I just don't feel good." And I go, "Okay, well, you need some help?" And he goes, "No, no, I'm fine. I'm fine." But I could tell he wasn't fine. So I proceeded to run right past him two more times, right?
Hmm.
And then I walk back down. This is like, because I do it minimum 5 times. Sometimes I try to do more, but this was like the third one. And I says, "Hey," after I ran by him 2 times, I said, "You're not looking too good. You sure you don't need some help?" And then he hadn't moved in that time period. He looked up and his eyes were uh, kind of watery, and he just said, "No, I'm not. I'm lost." And I go, "Well," I'm thinking to myself, how'd you get lost?" And I knew where you came in. We came in at the same time, so
Hmm.
you're not that lost.
Yep.
I know this trail quite well because I run it all the time. It's the same one. And he goes, "No," he goes, "I fell." And I go, "What?" And he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "I have a concussion." And I'm going, "Well, first of all, I happen to know a little bit about concussions. You don't have a concussion, trust me. I've had more than 40 of them, and my concussions are you wouldn't even be talking to me right now. At least the ones I had, playing rugby and fights and stuff. And so I laughed like I happen to know a little bit about concussions. You're fine. No, but then he said no. He goes, I fell. I hit my head and I don't know where I'm at." And I said, "Well," he goes, I'm lost." And I said, "You're trying to get back to your car?" And he goes, "Yeah." And I said, "Okay, here." So he got up on his own. I said, "I'll walk you down the trail and I'll show you because it's kind of confusing." So I walk him down the hill and across the creek and I point to the trail and I said, "This is where you came in right here. You took the wrong turn and started walking up the hill looking for his car because he left his friends. He didn't want to hold up his friends that they were doing the hiking, so he let them move on. So he came back, and so again, because he was very thankful, and he said, "Oh, I really appreciate it, really appreciate it." And he was an Indian and heavy accent Indian. So
Hmm.
I said, "You sure you're okay?" And he goes, "No, I'm not okay." He goes, I really am having a hard time. I'm really struggling." I don't know if those are exact words, but I said, "Why?" And he says, he goes, "I don't know. Something's wrong. Something's not right." I said, "Well," and he looked weak. And I said, "Well, first thing you have to do is you're doing the right thing. Get outside. I asked him what he did. He was a computer engineer. So you could tell he wasn't out very often. You could just tell by his body, his skin, his eyes, everything. It's somebody that was probably, coding all day long or whatever he does. I
Mhm.
said, it really, this is great that you're getting out. I go, but my recommendation is, he says, I need to walk on a flat surface. I said, no, you actually don't need to walk on a flat surface. I says, well, you need to walk on a unflat surface, but do it by yourself. Because I go, the reason I run the trails is because it's not flat and your body will calibrate. Your body will adjust to that. It needs to physically adjust to the imbalance. And he was a computer engineer, and as you know, I've done some project uh, development in AI, computer vision, and it's all about calibration the scene. So I knew enough about it conceptually, and then the conversation evolved into um, this framework that we created in the Imperfect Men's Club about these 5 areas of your life and calibration. And he was just saying, he goes, yeah, I'm really hard on, he goes, I fail a lot, like I'm a loser. And if you're a computer engineer, you're not a complete loser, right? And so my whole the conversation evolved into the importance of calibration and alignment. That your
Mhm.
body, I go, you're out of alignment, and you're taking the first step to get outside and get fresh air, and but you really, walk by yourself, and then eventually that can evolve. But you're trying to keep up with your friends, and now you feel like you're holding them back, and that's why you fell, because you were more concerned about your friends leaving you behind, or not keeping up with them, and you slipped twice. Like he said, he slipped like 2 or 3 times, and this last time he hit his head. He says, "Yeah, spend time alone. Be by yourself. You get
Yeah.
that right first. Then these other things come." And the conversation evolved, and I shared the Imperfect Men's Club podcast framework, and he was very, very grateful, obviously. Um, and so I'll let you kind of wrap up with what that meant. Was that a coincidence, or was that serendipity, or was that the universe um, aligning us because he needed somebody to talk to? He was a perfect stranger, right? He was, and like I said, he was
Well,
late
yeah,
20s
I
or
think,
early 30s.
yeah, I think he needed you in that moment, and I think
Mhm.
perhaps you needed him
That's
as
right. Yeah.
well. And
Thank you.
it's
Interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
call that what you will. I would say God put you both there for a reason, and you can call it you serendipity is a good word too. But yeah, no, I think, one of the things I talk to people a lot about in my work and in my life is paying attention. We talked about this before.
Hmm.
You could just as easily have walked right by him.
Hmm.
You could have, because
Hmm.
to go over to a guy who's on the ground and ask if he needs help is makes you vulnerable, right?
Hmm.
And maybe you're busy, or maybe you got other things on your mind, and you're not even but you paid
Hmm.
attention. And I think
Yeah,
this
remember, Mark, but I
exercise,
had 5 chances. Remember,
yeah,
because I run five.
yep,
It's my trail. I mean, my trails. I run the same trail. He was
yep,
basically blocking it with his feet.
yeah,
but
yeah.
but I appreciate what you're saying, because that was if I dropped by him one time. I had 5 chances. So it was actually on the third one is when I finally stopped and said, "You're not doing so good. I'm gonna." And
Well,
then
the first
and then
time
he
you
was
walk
vulnerable.
by, you don't know what's going on. The second
Yeah,
time you're beginning to wonder what's going on. And the third
yeah,
time you're like, this isn't right. This isn't right. And so
yeah.
maybe three is the magic number. But I think what we just described in this episode is has a lot to do, because we called it self-awareness, but it's another phrase for the same thing, is paying attention. It's like,
Hmm.
are you really listening? Are you really watching? Are you really in the
Hmm.
moment? And I think that we can be better at doing that with other people,
Yeah.
because engaging with people and paying attention to people is polite, respectful, and helpful.
Hmm.
But we can also do that with ourselves. And the once a year thing that you're describing, I think you'll find that you look forward to that ritual, and I think you'll probably end up doing it for the rest of your life, which is great. But I also would observe, because if you can do that for 5 seconds or 5 minutes or 5 days or whatever, it's
Hmm.
never, you can do it too much. I think that one of the
Yeah.
things I found, Jim, as I'm writing my book and doing more content creation about
Hmm.
helping men with divorce, I can feel what too much is, because it's
Hmm.
like it'll pull me into a state of negativity or injustice or unfairness, or it's just like, wait a second, no, that's
Mhm.
I'm missing. Paying attention is great, but wallowing is dangerous, right?
Mhm.
So anyway, no, it's a great list, it's a great topic,
Mhm.
and have at it with
Yeah.
in turn any other last minute things you want to say.
Yeah. Well, like you said, a lot of it is meeting people where they're at. There was no judgment. I remember him also really struggling with self-judgment and being a failure and comparing himself. Also, the relationship with his mother or all those things were coming into play. I just again had this framework because that's what we do every week on the podcast to share that with him in a way that was more structured. But something you said, you never know what somebody's going through,
Hmm.
and this is back to kind of to go full circle. Susan, again, she wasn't a very warm person, but she was really working on herself and try and before she passed away a few years ago, um, it was nice to see that's how she ended her life by really being a better person and serving. She was very
Yeah,
involved in the Catholic Church and
yeah,
served
yeah.
at
It's
that
good.
final stage in her life. It was a
It's good
nice
energy.
memory of her. But I
Yeah,
also remember how rigid she was, how unwarm she was.
yeah.
But
It must have been
she
hard for her to do.
it
Yeah.
was it was
Yeah.
so
Well,
yeah.
the last thing I'll close with this is that this guy was also a perfect example of how easy it is for all of us to go focus on one of the five areas of our life and neglect the other four. And it's
And
the reason, one of the reasons the framework is so handy, because it's like reminds people you can't let any of these lie and disregard them, or it will begin to impact all the others. And
yeah,
if this
yeah,
guy continues to take his walks and he continues to get some
yeah,
sun,
he'll be better. Yeah,
his attitude
yeah,
will
yeah,
improve.
yeah. Particularly young men at his age, right? Like I said, he was probably 30-ish, maybe late 20s. They're struggling. We're all
Yeah.
struggling in ways like we never could imagine with these technologies and not having human interaction. He had not, you could tell he had not been out.
Yeah.
He drove from
Yeah.
San Jose, that's an hour away, to Alamo where we were at, and that to take this walk. There's a lot of people are in a lot of pain right now, particularly
Yeah.
young
Well,
men.
maybe the recommendation or the observation is that we can all benefit from stepping back and
Yeah,
pausing and paying attention and self-reflecting. It's a great thing to do.
yeah. So, all right, Mark. Till next week.
Thanks, dude. See you.